Oh yeah, go ahead, pump it up. I'd love to catch a firefly that's far away. I see your whole crew staring as I put the speed down. You're like a soup can, I'm like Superman. I saw Veronica, the girl that put you off blast, cause you played harmonica in art class. I know you want her to, but you don't move cause you don't have any shoes. You touch a pom-pom, I touch an A-bomb. Aw yeah.
20 nights in the ice is a long time when there's hostels on the hill. It's not about what they want.
Hey everyone, welcome back to On the Sensors. Today we are talking in our next episode in our How to Destiny series about resource management. Today I'm joined by Poly86 and our spiffing guest Duncan who plays on our server. Been on the server a while, man.
Hey,
right. So today we're going to talk about how you make money, how you make your opponent not have money. Cover some things. So money basically makes this game flow, right? Without money, you're not gonna do anything. You're never gonna win on character dice alone. You can't win with what you start with. You need to ramp and build up what you're working with, right? So how do we do that? Let's throw it to you, Polly.
Well, there's a couple of base ways to make money in this game, right? There's specific cards that make you money. Things like fresh supplies make you net you $1 if you control the battlefield. There's characters that make you money. The newest Java that's out there has great dice sides that have great money. In conjunction with cards like Reap that allow you to turn a die to a money side and then ambush, you can resolve it. Those are always good money makers. There's also cards from ARH meta that steal money from your opponent. Not only make you money, but make your opponent lose money. And so it's kind of a two resource swing in that point. So I think there's dice, there's cards that specifically affect you, and then there's cards that affect you and your opponent.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. Okay, so Duncan, we've brought you on today because we agree that you're the money man. You seem to like your ramp. So what do you think about this? What's like your thought process of how you're gonna go from 0 to hero?
Well, I think for me, all card games, pretty much all board games, it's all about the economy. Is how you win the games. At the basis level in Destiny, you get 2 resources every turn, so you might want to play a 2-cost lightsaber on Anakin Skywalker, and then you immediately have an extra dice on the board, so you can then push your win condition, which is doing more damage. So at the basis level, you need money to be able to do things. How you use that money will increase how your efficiency in advancing your board state. So when you look back, I think at the history of most of the best decks in Destiny, they have all been, in my opinion, the outside of the big aggro decks that have to roll very well and thus rely upon a high variance. The ones that make money early on are the ones that generally can get to their win condition earlier. So for me, the decks that I look to make all make use of making money early and then finding the best way and best value to spend that money to then achieve your win condition. So, if you don't control your economy in this card game, you probably won't win the game because your opponent will be controlling their economy. And if they can make money quicker than you and spend it better than you, then, and steal your money as well, then they're going to achieve their win quicker and you'll be left with a bad board state. So, for me, it's all about money,
Yeah, no, I agree totally. It was an interesting point you made there about how decks in the past have the ones that have won have been the ones that manage their money the best, which is funny because now the best decks are the one that take money. They seem to be dominating it a bit. So 86 we're on 32. I don't know how much pirate stuff you do, but you played a deck where the plot was entirely about taking resources. What are your thoughts?
Are you talking about captured?
I am talking about captured,
okay.
Yes. Pre-errata
just
captured.
to make sure. Yep. So I did captured when it was before it was errated. I kind of like the damage more with any means necessary, but I used that in the fets.
Yeah.
So essentially, you want to think about your resources and what you have. And I would like to reiterate that I think that everything I have is a resource. You know, put it into captured. You want to make sure that you have money if you're playing against it. It's essentially like a bill. You think of rent every month. Well, when rent comes around, you're like, oh, I can't pay this. I don't know what to do it. You realize that I'm either going to
Yeah.
pay it or I'm going to be homeless. So that is kind of the deal. Is you need to pay your
The
bill.
light's not the reality, though.
No,
Yeah,
no dice equals homeless.
yeah.
Please play this
But
game
yeah,
with us.
but it's something that you need to pay and be prepared to pay, or else you can't activate your character. So going in, you need to think of everything like you need to have money to pay it. You need to have, you know, just like real life. You know, if we talk about captured, you know, having that resource back before it was errated. You could talk about Wretched Hive, I think, is discard a card. You could talk about, you know, someone who's going down and
Yeah.
maybe you only have one card left, or you're going to pitch a card, but you really want to keep the other card, and someone hasn't Wretched Hive yet, then that's probably going to come, and you're going to lose your other card. If you have Sinister Peace, that is a red villain card. It's remove a die showing a value of 2 or more. You have to discard another card. If your opponent gets rid of your other card, Sinister Peace does nothing that turn. You can only use it to discard to reroll. Um, so taking everything, and I would think making sure that you allocate, you make a budget essentially for your turn. You
Yeah.
have mitigation you're going to want to play. You're going to have those unforeseen expenses like your car breaking down. You know, someone's going to roll out into a 4-for-1. And you're like, well, I don't want to take that, so I want to mitigate it. If you don't have money to do what you need to do or what you want to do, you're going to have a bad time.
Yeah, I think
No, I think
I think you 86 you bring up an interesting point, right? We talk about resources and we mainly talk about money, right? Having money, taking money away from your opponent, how are you going to play the cards in your hand? But realistically, resources in this game and realistically any card game, any economy not just has to do with the money that you make, but your health. You know, how valuable are the cards in your hand? You know, do you pitch a card that might remove a die in order to re-roll one of your die for 2 damage, maybe, right? Is that worth it? Or is it worth it to pitch that to re-roll 3 dice for possible 6 damage?
yeah.
And so, you know, really thinking about all of that as resources. Um, Games that I've played, like the Veers Pyre before, you know, before the ARH shakeup, it was all about playing Camino and trying to just survive health-wise, using your health as a resource to in order to get the Camino online to get that extra guy out so you can do the extra damage and just sustain, right, to get to the end of the game. And so I think that's huge too when we talk about resource management, not just money.
Yeah, definitely. Survivability, I guess, is the word there. You know, how I guess you have to weigh up in your mind when you start around, like, if you get the best, if you get the absolute god roll, you do the best you physically can. How much do I care? And I think the best players I've seen have been the ones that go, oh, by 10-3, I'll be in this position, and you'll be in this position, and I'll
Yeah.
knock you,
Right.
basically. Um, so
Yeah.
you've got to weigh up not just money, which is the main point here, but anything that's available to you: money, cards, dice in the pool. Which sort of brings me on to the next point I'd like to talk to you, gents, about, which is our supporting characters. So the decks that make the most money usually have a money maker, we sometimes call them, or it's the 3 word. So do we have any examples of like our favorite money makers at the minute? You know, the ones that you can tell FFG, ARH, TCI, whoever looked at them and went, I want you to make resources and nothing else.
I was like, yes.
Watto.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say.
Yeah. What a
His die
great
can't be removed
example.
by blue. Yeah, Watto makes money. I love Watto for that reason.
Tickle me
Exactly.
Java.
Anyone
Java.
with two,
Yeah,
anyone with 2 resource sides on their character
true.
starting are great. Like Wat Tambor, I believe, has 2. Obviously, Watto. Han, the new Han, or rather Transformations Han, has 2 single resource sides there. So, yeah, any character that's got a higher chance of rolling resources than anything else is going to be very good. And if you can combine that with a focus side as well, ideally, then that means that eventually when those 2 resources go onto the board state, you've got focus sites to be able to maximize them to get the best things. Yeah.
Well, it's interesting. It's interesting that we talk about characters, supporting characters, but I think now in the ARH meta, there's also supporting supports that
Yes.
actually make you money. Or, I mean, there's obvious ones like merchant, but when we look at like raiding party, that can take a resource off of something when it activates. Like
Yeah.
Mm,
there's cards that let you put resources on things, or transformation Han. If you rescue Han, he gets 5 resources on him also. Well, raiding party would allow you to take that extra resource. I think
Yeah.
when he activates, you take that resource too, right?
yeah, yeah, you do.
Yeah.
So
And there's
it's not.
also cards. Oh, sorry.
Go no
There's
no
also
go ahead.
cards like, uh, I mean, it binds all things. And Tech Team are cards that you only really want to draw in turn one, but if you can get them down in turn one, they both cost 1 resource.
Mm,
But they will ultimately save you 3 or 4 resources over the course of a game. So,
Yeah.
it's just like you said, Merchant Trader probably falls into that benefit. You won't immediately see the benefit the turn you play it, but from turn two onwards, it starts effectively saving you money, which is the same as making you money.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
It's interesting. A card that comes to mind that I don't think gets a lot of play because we look at these support cards that make us money like one cost, right? It binds all things. What's the villain? The villain one. For
Forbidden Lore,
Forbidden
possibly.
Lore. There we go. I don't play blue that often. Forbidden Lore, Merchant Freighter, right? But 2 cost Smuggler's Ring is great because it gets you a resource and an action, which I think is awesome, is really cool.
Yeah, yeah.
You know what my favorite money making card is? Predatory Banker.
What?
that's the that's the title, isn't
Dude,
it? Yeah.
if you're gonna take away one from this film, it's don't put Predatory Banker anywhere near your deck. Um, no, what I wanted to say was I'm so glad that you brought up Watambor, Duncan.
Yeah.
I want to talk about a deck that came out of Convergence, but it was only recently pioneered by our friend Philip. Um, Palpatine Limited Power, who I still think to this day is an absolute scumbag. But him and him and Tambor. So I
Mhm.
think it's hilarious that you can play Wat Tambor, who has a kick-ass power action, but you never use it. Which
Yeah.
just shows the value of like how important money is. That you can spend those 12 points for that character and never use his ability once. But the fact that he has the 2 money size, the focus, and he's red,
Yeah.
is really beneficial. It's not about resources, but again, at some point we're going to talk about like colors. Put what colors you want on your team. Um, yeah, so I think it's worth noting that even if a character you want to use who maybe fits. Another one I'm thinking is Old Man Han, who again is like 2 money size, 10, whatever.
Mhm.
You don't think because it's a character in your team, you have to build your deck around them because you don't. As long as they're doing their purpose, ignore everything else about them. They got
Yeah.
leaders, type got
I mean,
scoundrel. Ignore if they're doing their job, then you don't have to worry about it.
you mentioned a player that we know, Phil. There, the amount of decks that he had in that had the Jake Lloyd version of Anakin Skywalker. The really cheap
Yeah,
one, so he could get those
yeah,
relics. That and that card was a useless. Yeah, well, not useless. It has its own utility, but it's going to die pretty soon, and especially with all the spot yellow requirements and stuff for it. But yeah, sometimes you would just like what Tambor put a card in just to get the color and the different ways in which you spend your resource. Uh, but I actually wanted to sort of bring up something. I think the good thing at the start of any discussion on resources is if you can put a value on the resources, right? You know, so typically we've all come to learn that 1 resource would be converted into 2 damage with most cards.
mhm.
So, for example, like a focused fire or lightsaber throw, or cards that you can pay 1 for and they'll do 2 damage. Or similarly, you'll pay 1 for them and they will save 2 damage, like riot shield typically, or armor plating,
Defensive.
or field medic, or any of these kind of cards. So I think that's actually one of the key things to when you're thinking about your resources and how to spend it, is what is the value of that money that you have in your hand. You know, um, for me, like And the curve, people talk about the curve, if something's above curve or below curve, ideally you want to fill your deck with cards that are above the curve. And if you take the value of one resource equaling 2 damage or 2 shields or 2 health, then anything that is better than that, so you pay 1 and you'll do 3 with it, like backup muscle, you would pay 1 and eventually that will convert into 3 damage of the course of the game. Would be above curve, or even riot shield on a trooper would be above curve, because you're paying 1 but you're saving 3 damage. So I mean, that's just something I had to say about resources, that I think it's important to know the value of what your resources are.
Yeah. It's definitely worth noting. And you mentioned earlier about tech team and it binds. I was speaking to a new player recently who was using the big Kenobi, the big 19-point Kenobi and little R2. And was basically why would I ever want binds? It costs 1, it saves 1. But it's if you get that turn 1 and it's a 4-round game, it's made you 3 money if you
Yep.
if you play it right.
But
And
if you
that's
don't
one of
get
those
it turn 1, if you don't get it
Don't
turn 1, then it's pretty much a dead card. So that's the decision a lot of people have to make.
Exactly. Every single round the value goes down, but you put it in there because it's a chance that it's going to set up the rest of your game.
Yeah.
You know,
and the only time you get to shape your hand is in your mulligan. So, that's a card that you're going to mulligan for. You're going to probably do a hard mulligan looking for an It Binds All Things. Because you know that if that's not in your first 5 cards, when you have the opportunity to shape that 5 cards as much as you can, then from then on, if it's not in there, most people, it's reroll fodder. So, yeah. Anyway.
So I think, what's really good about this and having a turn is also playing supports that aren't necessarily designed to make money. If you look at something like Entourage, has a 2 indirect side, a 3 indirect side, has a 2 disrupt, I think. And then, everybody looks at the special. How many scoundrels do you have? Well, it also has a 2 money side. And, cashing that out, that, Entourage costs 3. There's 2 resources back. Each turn you get that, that's, more supports you can put in play.
Yeah.
I think we've talked about the merchant freighters and, fresh supplies gain a resource if you have control the battlefield. Truce, which is you and your opponent gain a resource. You can small battles 1 to gain a resource. You can play extra firepower, the plot, to gain a resource. But one thing that's key to note is we have a lot of die that we can play that have a resource side, and those shouldn't be overlooked.
No, not at all. Hard muscle is a great example of one of those that at the right time, every single side of that die is awesome. It's just expensive. It's one of those where you want to keep money in the bank for, or don't keep money in the bank for, as long as you can play something better. But there is no point playing your hired and then completely forgetting that every side of that dice is a pay side. But if you're worried about it, then do things like Truce, do things like Rendezvous. I think it's great that you've drawn specific examples. One I want to bring up is a card called No Good, if we remember that one. Sort of tying into what you're saying, Duncan, about the 1 money being worth 2 damage. That card makes 2 damage worth 2 money, but sort of backwards from how we'd work it. It's these specific cards that you have to look at and say, is this going to do me more hurt than good? It's definitely worth looking at these cards that we all know that make money and going, there is going to be a condition on this. How often am I going to fulfill a condition, and how much is that going to hurt me in the game?
Yeah.
I think going back to originally what we had said, the 3 types of making money is, cards that make you money, dice that make you money, and then cards that make your opponent lose money and us make money. When we talk about wanting to be efficient and 1 money equals 2 damage or 2 shields or 2 health or whatever, what are some cards that, I mean, I know ARH has a bunch of new cards. I know Pirates is doing dirty pirate things with people's money. But I know in other games we call that a huge swing. Like, think about it. It's a huge swing if you can spend 1, resource to take away 2 resources from your opponent. Like, that's huge. And I think managing there's definitely newer, better ways to throw your opponent out now than there used
Yeah.
to be.
I mean, we won't drill too much into power creep, because that's a bit of a taboo subject right now.
True.
But you know, the the ability to make your opponents ticked has never been more rife than at the minute.
The one thing that I compare it to is when droids was a huge thing, and you used to be able to just turn one, roll out, and remove 2 resources from your opponent. Oh, sorry, you can't play this round. My bad.
But I guess it's good that FFG gets a bit of a bad rep. But I mean, I guess it's good that they saw that, and now where was the last time any of you saw Faithful played? So money is one of the most important things in this game. Just to wrap up a little bit, money is the most important, like one of the most important things in this game.
To give one
'cause
example,
that-
by the way, I'll interject. Since Majo's not here, he had a game where he was playing witches, and witches can be pretty brutal, but you need a curse on your opponent. His opponent disrupted him, turn 1. It's instigate to disrupt,
yeah.
and that whole turn he could do nothing.
Oh well, here's the thing: you do your opening hand, plan you're going to have 2 money. As soon as you don't have 2 money, if everything if you don't have any zeros, you're
Mhm.
just knackered, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah, good point, Nasons.
I think also it's probably good to say you're talking about turn 1. I think resources to me are worth more in turn 1 than they are later on in the game. What I look to do is whenever I roll out a character, even Raylo. I mean, I play Raylo quite a lot. I'm looking for those resources turn 1. I think that we talk about the value of what a resource is. I think the value is the highest in turn 1, and then it gets smaller as the game goes on. As the game goes on, you want to convert those resources into damage, realistically, or mill if you're playing that. But yeah, that's basically it. I think they're at their highest value in turn 1. If you can negate your opponent's resources in turn 1, I mean, ideally, if he's playing Luke Dak, he would put down a Luke Skywalker, X-wing for 2 resources, and then you could instantly desperate measures it. Then that means you'd be very happy to take that two indirect damage or 2 damage to your own side, and then that's effectively disrupted them for 2 because they've spent their resources, and and if they're not looking to get their resources in turn 1, you've got 2 resources and they've got 0 resources, and they've got a board state that is not as good as yours. So yeah, turn 1's a really important thing when you're talking about resources. That's when they're at their most efficient, I would say. I don't know what you guys think.
Yeah, exactly. If you can get your board state going, again going back to Barnes and Tech Team, if you can get that board state set up 10, you can sort of forget that money is in this game and just rely on them and be sort of just be quite comfortable in your position.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean,
Let's wrap up again because you guys could talk about money for hours.
yeah, that's true.
Well, just anyone have any last points you just want to make?
I was going to say one thing regarding, there are things that we can play in the beginning of the round, middle of the round when we make more money. But, one thing that's really important is we didn't talk about, and it will come in the future, events. Something like mitigation. So the question is, how many resources do you want to keep hold of if you want to play mitigation? Granted, we have all over the board that they cost everywhere from 0 to 5 that I can think of. What do you guys want to keep? 7. There's a 7 cost removal.
Leave from the front?
Yes.
No, that's not
Is
removal,
that...
though.
That's not removal? I don't know. I just know that it costs
sorry.
7.
Yes, sorry.
Shut up,
Well,
Polly.
it is an event. I said event. But yeah, I did say event. Never mind at first, so it's on me. But for removal, 0 to 5, what do you want to keep in your hand and what do you want to prepare for just in case something goes sour?
Yeah, indeed.
Go ahead, Jack.
I was just going to say, someone was complaining to me recently about reversal, and I'm trying to explain to them that reverse is one of the best pieces of mitt we have at the minute. Because looking at a card, let's remove one dice, it costs 3, is so unbelievably daunting. But when you break down into it, it's like, oh, this card's amazing, isn't it? You have to. Every bit of mitt in the game is different, right? Otherwise, it'd be a little bit dull. So you have to look at, again, coming back to how beneficial is it for this deck.
I mean, I think regarding how much money do you keep back for your mitigation, it kind of depends on what your deck's trying to do. If you've got character dice that are inherently good at furthering your win condition, so that are inherently good at dealing damage. If you're playing, like Big Luke, for example, or Big Vader or Big Maul or any of these kind of guys, you'll often think, I'll keep my 2 resources back. I'll mitigate the hell out of them. I'm going to really disrupt the whole plan. I'm going to keep those 2 resources back for like a headstrong or, a feat of strength, for example. I mean, imagine a feat of strength and a disciplined mind, or a fluid riposte in 1 turn is getting rid of 3 dice. If you're happy to spend your resources on that, and you have the faith that your character dice are going to take you to the place where you want to go, then yeah, I mean, some of the most frustrating Polyfly decks that you'll ever play against are cards where he's got a handful of 5 mitigation events, and and all he needs is like his IG88 or his Veers or any of this kind of stuff to just do the damage. You're going to not be able to resolve any of your dice. It'll take a while, but at the end of the day, if you finish your turn, you only have to finish your turn better than they had their turn, and you're at an advantage. And then the next round, you play your turn and have an advantage at the end of over their turn. Then you're going to get ahead of the game every day, so every round. So yeah, to answer your question, 86, I think that's probably, depending on what your character lineup is, sometimes you can only spend your money on mitigation. That's a really good way to disrupt your opponent's game plan, as we all know from playing Poly.
Yeah, definitely. Right, I'm gonna post up to this money talk. Well, thank you 3 for joining me today, talking about the. I guess one of the backbones of this game, right? Without money, we're all stuck with our 4 dice or whatever. Yeah, awesome. Okay, thank you everyone for watching this episode of How to Destiny. As we've said before, we're going to be covering all the base topics of this game, and then going on to some more advanced stuff. We'll be talking about some specifics soon, hopefully. Cool. All right, thank you all for watching again, and we will see you in the next one.